I think being an intern is underrated. You know, here's the thing. People are like, well, interns don't get paid. Well, yeah, but if you go to college, you pay through the nose for that.
In a fair world, we would think, you know what? I'm going to really bust my ass in this first year and show them what I'm made of. And then they're going to give me my first evaluation and they're going to pay me what I'm worth. And that never happens.
You start off all hopeful as a kid, like, oh, you know, I'm dreaming. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. And then you get into school, and they basically tell you, "You're nothing, maggot."
This wouldn't necessarily be an ethical experiment, but I wonder if it's not that bad.
That's how you get Nazis. Just saying. It's not like, what are you going to do in college? What's your goal? Like, what are you going to learn? It's just go to college because reasons.
If I had endless amounts of money, I'd go to school all day. I would.
Well, okay, so okay, it does cost money if you want that piece of paper, but it doesn't cost anything to learn, especially in today's world. Like, you can spend days and days on YouTube.
There's a person who got a PhD in philosophy. So that is literally a doctorate in philosophy of philosophy. The quickest way to end a war is to lose.
Okay, Sun Tzu. Welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. I am Eric Rosenblatt, and we would love it if you would like and share this video and, you know, subscribe to the channel, hit that little bell, and do all the jump through the hoops that YouTube wants you to if you want to see new things. We would appreciate that very, very much.
And I'm Casey Rochford, and we would like to remind you gently that we write our own music. And we would further like to gently remind you that you can find that music.
Yes, gently remind you. Just a gentle reminder.
That's like a capital insurrection gentle reminder. But you can find the music at the end of the episode. Just the tip though. You have to go to patreon.com/ksmvidcast or Spotify or Amazon or Google if you want to get the music. So,
oh yeah,
do that. So I don't know what we're talking about tonight, but I'm gonna guess that it's maybe something dystopian, judging from your shirt. Having 1984 and Brave New World.
Yes. I actually just got this shirt recently. I love it. Like a Venn diagram combining all this stuff, and it says "You are here" in the middle.
What's the bottom one?
It's Fahrenheit 451.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oddly, like the shirt has nothing to do with the topic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, we could probably go into such dystopian discussions in the future, but I thought the shirt was really brilliant, and I had to have it. So yeah,
good shirt for the last day of Trump's presidency.
Yeah, exactly. You know, yeah, to each their own, right? No, this is more like a kind of a I don't want to say timeless topic, but modernly timeless, if that's the right way to put it. I think we should talk about whether going to college is a good idea for like everybody. You know, it's always said like, oh, you know, go to college and stuff. And but is simply going to college the right decision for everybody? Um,
Yeah, I've got a lot of ideas on that because I went to college, got a 4-year degree, and it felt a lot like a repeat of high school,
yeah,
with prerequisites and stuff like that. And I feel like, isn't high school supposed to be the prerequisite for college? Like, I would rather see a more buttressed and strong foundation in those formative years. And when you decide what you want to study, you just study that.
yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that. That like, actually, I kind of feel like high school shouldn't necessarily be a prerequisite for college, but a prerequisite for just life in general,
Hmm.
right? Like you should come out of the high school gate being able to live your life however you want. You know, if it includes going to college, you know, going into academia and things like that, then so be it. But if it doesn't, you should be equally prepared. And it almost feels to me like all the schooling, the 12 whatever years of, you know, non-college school that we go to as kids is just directing everybody to going to a college. And it doesn't make sense to me. Like as somebody who kind of just half-assed went to college for a bit, um, and you know, I'm happy, I'm content. Like, yeah, sure, I'm not making millions of dollars, but you know how many millionaires there are that didn't go to college out there? Bill Gates springs to, well, he went to college, but he dropped out. So, um,
Yeah.
like,
Well, yeah. I mean, there's certainly, I didn't have a college degree until I was like, what, 30 something, in
yeah,
my 30s. And, I got by. I wasn't rich or anything, but, like, I got around and got a fair amount of varied experience here and there. And that's worth a lot. And it's really helped me, honestly, more than my own degree has. I mean,
yeah.
a lot of that stuff is rote memorization that you just lose almost immediately unless you're using it all the time. And yeah, got news for you. Don't use it all the time. Like
Yeah.
calculus, haven't used it once, forgot it all.
And I'm sure that calculus was a prerequisite for what you were doing, like
Oh
biology and
yeah.
stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Like how often do you use calculus?
Calc
Um,
2 even. Like not
yeah.
even just pre-calc or one calculus, it was calc 2.
Well, and it's not to say that like knowing those things is bad,
No.
but should it be a requirement to, I guess, I don't know, to use a video game metaphor, like unlock an achievement or something and be
Yeah,
able to
right.
move forward? Um,
Well,
seems a
and
little bullshitty.
I even having a degree versus one class shy of a degree, you're really gonna draw a huge thick line between those two things. Like,
That's a good point, right? Like you know, you've done 99% of the
like
courses and
oh,
everything, and if you
I
don't,
I missed French 3, so I didn't get my degree, but I know everything else there is to know about biology. Well, you don't have the piece of paper though.
well, exactly. That's kind of the flaw in that system, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, this could probably go into like education in general, but yeah, like there's so much of a push for college. Like you're never going to be anything unless you go to college, and it's like I know a lot of people who went like 4 years or more in college and they haven't really done much with their life. But I know a lot of people who didn't go to college at all and have done all kinds of remarkable things. Like, and then what kind of college too is another thought. Um, there's the 4-year college, the academic version, where you know, do book learning and things like that. But what about like community college or trade schools or things where you
Mhm.
learn a skill that people pay a lot of money for. Like that's something
I
that like
I
I don't
kind of wish I
understand.
did a trade school, actually, to be
Yeah.
honest. Like better money for far less brain power.
Well,
I mean,
it's
not to say that it's like stupid work or anything like that. It's just like it's not, it's not as heady as hard
Mhm.
science. Like not much is really like,
Yeah.
um, it- getting a science degree is like a 60-hour a week commitment. Like you get way more homework than other degrees do.
Oh yeah.
It's intense, and it doesn't actually pay that well. Like,
Well, and you have to think like what are the opportunities when you come out? Like, are you going to be
mhm.
able to get work in this field? In a trade school, you may not
Well,
even need to look for work. You might be able to just start your own business now
mhm.
as a plumber or something along those lines and make six figures
Now
right out of the door.
I kind of want to rant about something though regarding trade schools and
Mhm.
a lot of that kind of industry, right? Journeyman and stuff like that whole concept.
Mhm.
Apprentice, I that's always rubbed me wrong. Like they have this set number of years that they think it takes you to like learn everything there is to know about that job, and
As if everybody learns at the same pace and you're going
yeah,
to have the same
it's
experiences.
like
And
they're
at
treating
the
it
end,
like a
you're just
video
going to
game.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, you've gotten 10 experience points. How would you like to allocate them? Actually, a video game would be more modular than than the apprenticeships out there.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree that whole system is kind of antiquated. Like maybe in a certain sense, like a certain time, it made sense, but
Yeah.
it probably
Hon-
doesn't now.
Honestly,
Um,
what's really that's what drove me away from going into any kind of trade is that time commitment is kind of ridiculous. Like different people learn at different paces. Most people, um, and I don't really necessarily have data to support this, but I think most people after 6 months at a job know pretty much all the basics. You might not know all the minutia,
yeah,
but you certainly don't need like 5 to 10 years in a position in order to be, you know, looked up to as somebody who knows what they're talking about.
well, that's a really good point. Like, what is the where's the delineation between being a noob, somebody who's really green,
Yeah,
and being an expert or a master or something like that.
yeah,
Um, who's to say? I don't know. And honestly, I feel like the whole trade. Not every industry is like that, but some
mhm,
are, especially contract based industries.
yeah,
Um, the idea that you have these stages and the whole, like you said, journeyman thing and all that stuff. You have to practice under somebody, and then you get authentication from your your peers or your superiors or something, whatever. Um,
go
it's
through
kind of
training.
bullshit.
Yeah,
Like, I don't know that makes you a better person, because the thing is, like, there are plenty of people who have professional licenses in all manner of fields. I'm not talking just trade schools, but academic ones as well,
mhm.
in the realms of science and all kinds of things, um, who don't know shit. Like, they're as stupid as the next guy. Like, there might be some random person on the internet that knows more than they do about a particular subject. Just having that plaque on the wall doesn't necessarily it doesn't prove that you're good at what you do.
Yeah,
I think your accomplishments prove that, but that's very hard to quantify,
oh yeah.
in a school sense, I guess.
Well, I think the biggest problem is that in a fair world, we would think, you know what, I'm gonna really bust my ass in this first year and show them what I'm made of, and then they're gonna give me first evaluation and they're going to pay me what I'm worth. And that never happens.
Oh, no. No. Well,
there's never like a hard look at like, okay, you've been in this now, you've got a little experience, and we're seeing how you work and what your style is and how you've adapted to the culture and how well you know your shit. And nobody ever says like, hey, here's like a $5 an hour raise because we think you're really awesome.
This is the thing. Like, it's not a meritocracy. It's more based on tenure. Look at any given professional field. The people that have been there the longest do pretty much the least amount of work, with some exceptions. But there's a bunch of people that sit around jerking off all day, probably not literally, but figuratively.
Maybe.
Well, you never know. And they get paid way more than the people that come in with fresh ideas and new ways of doing things and stuff. I mean, maybe that's just the way it works. And I don't know, I can't think of like an easy solution to that, because how do you analyze things and determine who's worthy of getting paid the most? How do you measure accomplishments in that regard? Like that's difficult.
Yeah. But I mean, getting back to the college thing, like I don't really necessarily know that all those chips can be put into the education pile. Obviously experience does count for something, but like requiring like years of experience and a degree is also another like shitty thing. Like, you just graduated, how is it you're supposed to have years of experience?
Well, and that's the unfortunate side effect of applying for a job. If you start a business, you've got a leg up on all of your, I guess, competitors in that regard. But they don't teach that in school.
Oversaturation would, like, if too many people open businesses, no one would really thrive.
Well, the fact that there's like a gas station on one side of the street and a gas station on the other side of the street, and they both make a bunch of money. There could be two Starbuckses on opposite sides of a street, and they're both busy. Like,
sure, but
there's room for everything.
If you put a Starbucks and a coffee black, like,
well,
like,
yes,
it's also about brand recognition,
Well, that's true. And not just because you work in a particular field doesn't mean all work is of the same grade or worthy of the same pay. That's why you have Walmart and you have Nordstrom, and both can succeed just fine. It's about quality of work, and brand recognition and things like that. But I think like there's so much of a push. This is kind of where the genesis of all of this came from, is like everybody's always talking about like, you gotta go to college, otherwise you're gonna be nothing. You're gonna be a fucking deadbeat if you don't go to college. But that's where it ends. It's not like, what are you going to do in college? What's your goal? Like, what are you going to learn? It's just go to college because reasons, and that's it. And then we wonder why everybody flounders and spends ridiculous amounts of money. Like,
there are plenty of college degrees that you get nothing out of. Like there's a person who got a PhD in philosophy. So that is literally a doctorate in philosophy of philosophy.
So at that point, you could basically be a teacher, and that's about it.
A teacher of philosophy, probably.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's my point, is like there's no direction. It's like the end goal is go to college because your life is going to be better, which, okay, I probably blame like generational ignorance and blinders and things like that for that, because a long time ago that was a fact. Nowadays, college degrees, like, you can get that out of a fucking Cracker Jack box. Like, everybody has one of those, like, it doesn't mean anything. Skills, knowledge, capability, innovation and ingenuity. Like that's what matters. And they don't teach that in school, by the way.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I don't know if you can teach things like ingenuity, but I mean, there's things you can teach that would build that skill, I think. Like critical thinking.
Yeah, and having
yeah.
experiences, I think, are really key to that. That's why I think like you're better off actually getting an internship or something, even if you work for free. It's more valuable skills than you're going to get from a college professor, depending on what you do, obviously. But it, it, the idea that you have to throw down so much money, people essentially walk away from college with what amounts to like a mortgage on a house in debt.
Yeah.
And then the best job they could get, because no one gave them any direction. They're just like, go to college. That's it. Yeah, go to college. And now they have like $100,000 of debt, maybe more, depending on what field they went into. And the best job they could get is being a cashier at McDonald's, because nobody's hiring for those fields. Yeah. Like, and there's all this debt you have to pay off, and okay, there's been all the talk about how much more people with college degrees make over their lifetime. It's like $90,000 or something like that, or $100,000. And I'm like, well, that's how much you paid to go to college. So isn't that kind of a wash? Right? Like, you'd be better off paying like far less, a fraction of that cost, and going to a trade school and having to learn considerably less in some situations, especially because since it's not academic, it's more professional. Truck driving school, for God's sake, like get a CDL and you'll make more money than most people that come out of a 4-year college. Okay, you're gonna have to learn how to put chains on a truck,
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's not all about money though, right? Like it's kind of a supply and demand thing, as far as if you see skilled work as a commodity or something, you got to think of it like, well, if everyone just said, you know what, what's the point of school? It's so expensive. It really is a wash, monetarily. I'm just going to go into construction. Well, it's like, you're only going to build so much, because, like all the other places that you would have had your college degree skilled work at are now going out of business because everyone went into construction. It's a delicate balance. It's an ecosystem, really.
Sure. And you remember in the 90s when everybody went into nursing and x-ray technology and stuff, and the market was flooded with x-ray techs. And remember BCTI? Oh yeah. Good times. Well, but you're right. It's not all about money. It's all about like what you want to accomplish in your life. But I don't think that is something that is kids in school, non-college school, grade school, that kind of thing. They're not inspired to think that way. It's all about, every step of this, all the grades, all the standardized testing that you take leads you to going to college, getting accepted, getting a degree, and then, life is going to be good. Kind of like, just have some kids. It'll be good. White picket fences, rainbows and unicorns. Like, you get a degree and that's it. That does bug me, because the problem I have is that it's more about like doing work for somebody else, and not at all about doing work because you want to do something great.
Yeah.
Like that's something they squish very early in school. They crush that down. They break you until you're nothing. Like the Marines. Not that the Marines are bad. I'm just saying. But that it's kind of akin to that. Like you start off all hopeful as a kid, like, I'm dreaming, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and then you get into school and they basically tell you you're nothing, maggot, and then like you have to go to college, and yeah, everybody falls in line to that, and then we have a bunch of drones, and that bugs me. Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of feel like college would be structured a lot differently if, I know you're not necessarily a fan of socialized education or anything, like free college and all that stuff. But what if college were, quote unquote, free to you and I coming off the street? Say we go apply for a job that we would like to do, but it requires some specialized knowledge, right? Like plenty of jobs do. Like,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, college definitely has its place. But what if the onus was on that business to invest in you and pay for your education and say, oh yeah, in like 2-3 years, because it would be like a focused education at that point.
Oh man.
2-3 years, I'll have this employee with a fresh education.
Oh,
and
you opened up a box right there, a Pandora's box.
It's business feeding into business.
I don't know if I can respond to everything without like losing track of thoughts, but no, that's a good point. Like the industries should drive the learning, right? Like the places that want people who know stuff should fund education to teach people the stuff they want their employees to know.
Yeah. And if you want to pay your own way through college, it could be cheaper then. You could be a career student if you want.
No, here's the thing. If like, HP wanted a bunch of computer people and computer scientists and electrical engineers and stuff, like, because there aren't that many of them, they might be inclined to fund an educational program to teach people that stuff through a college so they could come out and be prospective employees. Everybody wins at that point. And it would work in any industry.
Yep. And say you're the type of person that just naturally gets it, right?
Yeah.
And you graduate high school and you know your shit better than somebody that's got a 4-year college degree. But you don't want to go through college because you would be bored because you already know all that stuff.
Yeah.
But say there's a small business that wants to break into that industry, but they can't afford to put people through college. They could hire you with your given talents and not have to, sink that money into college, and they might get even a better worker,
Well, and that's one of the things that I think being an intern is underrated. Here's the thing. People are like, well, interns don't get paid. Well, yeah, but if you go to college, you pay through the nose for that. So, put it on a scale. Like, which is better, the experience you get from working in the industry, or paying a bunch of money for the hope that maybe you'll make it someday? I put my faith a little bit more in doing the work because experience talks in the industry.
Internships, yeah, I get it in principle. Like, if you do it in high school, that's one thing, but if you got to pay the bills, then it doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay,
yeah, I agree. Like, and that's where
and what's
high
a
school
paid intern? Is that not just an employee? Like,
well, yeah, that's a good point. Well, in high school, that what you said, like, I agree. Like, shouldn't high school be the end of it? Like, you should actually, high school should be the time you have learned all there is to know about the basics, and now you're exploring your future. Maybe you do some unpaid internships at a couple places, see if you like it, see if you get it, if it fits with who you are. And hopefully at the end of high school, you would come out with a job or a business or something like that. But I don't understand how 12 years, we're like, okay, 4 years is enough for academic college. Oh, that's totally good. You can have, a pretty good degree in 4 years. 12 years of public education, that isn't worth shit. Like that.
Well, even private education. Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't discriminate whatsoever between the two as far as how much they suck.
Mhm.
And I mean, I'd like to do a whole episode on, alternate forms of education and how, like, I don't think any of them are any good. Like, I think they all have a hell of a lot of drawbacks.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I totally
like,
agree.
Like there's one called like unlearning or something, and I'm like, oh my god, it's Montessori for older kids. Like
You go like unschooling. Well,
that.
okay.
Yeah,
So
that's cool.
so to some extent that kind of makes sense. Like breaking the stuff that broke you might be valuable for some people. But yeah, like, oh man, I completely agree. Like we should definitely go down that rabbit hole one day. Because I think this is going to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the private, public, school, whatever. It all sucks. And I would ask people who think that education is so important. Well, what's important? Is it the grade? Is it the scores you get on your standardized tests? Or is it just simply learning things?
Yeah.
Because that's my personal takeaway is like knowing how to do things, being independent, being able to tackle the stuff that life throws at you, no matter what it is. That should be the goal. Yes, academic stuff, studying history, that's really important. Mathematics, well, mathematics is actually very useful. Even the deeper you go, going into calculus and stuff like that, it's actually pretty useful. You can use it.
Yeah.
But not everybody has to know all of the ins and outs,
Yeah.
the intimate
It's very
details.
limited applications. Like
Yeah.
the higher you go in any particular educational field, the less often you're going to see it used, right?
Yeah,
Like,
well,
the specialization works.
Sure. And that's my thought is like, what's the end game? Like, what is the purpose of having an educational system at all? Whether it be elementary or middle school or high school and college, go across the world, whatever brand you apply to it, what's the goal? Is it to get grades or is it to make a whole, complete person? I will invoke. I'm going to invoke Cicero here, and people should look him up. His style of education, but maybe we should be going in that direction. Of course, that makes people who are difficult to control. For those conspiracy theorists out there,
I was just kind of rattling something around in my head, and I was thinking about like homeschooling and all that stuff, and how you don't necessarily have any guarantees that that person has learned the core prerequisite stuff that is required to complete your college degree or whatever. But then I started thinking, like, you're paying them. Why are they requiring anything of you to be done in the first place? It should be your risk. Like, if I want to pay this money and flunk out, that's my risk.
Well,
right?
Such is the way in college. Yeah.
But that's my point. Is like, even in college, you have prerequisites. Like, you can't take such and such class until you've taken these other classes. Well, screw you. Like, but
why can't you like just skip?
I mean, once upon a time you could test in, right? I don't think they do that anymore.
Really?
I don't think so, because they want the money. But
yeah, well, that is another thing, is the cost of college and
it's like, if you're gonna have prerequisites, you better be paying me to go to college.
well, and the prerequisites should be sensible, right? Like, they should be connected. Like, you shouldn't have to take French to learn calculus.
No, the foreign language requisites are completely idiotic because if that's not your major, you will forget it. It's wasted time.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point. It's like, how much of college is wasted time?
Like I can't even remotely say that I speak Swedish anymore. Like I never really could do much more than like first grade Swedish anyway, and that was in college, right? So
yeah, exactly. Like that's a huge problem. And yet so much value is placed on this. Like it's some kind of holy, I don't know, holy grail or something. Like that's the thing you need to succeed in life. Well, what if you just need to know how shit works to succeed in life? Maybe you don't need to go to college. And that's my point, is like, you should come out of high school being able to succeed in life, regardless of whether you go to college, a four-year college, or a trade school, or you just do nothing and work at McDonald's, or you decide, I'm going to open a hot dog stand. Like whatever you choose, you should have all of the necessary skills, especially considering how much it costs in the US. It is expensive. The amount of money spent, quote unquote, me. educating people, like not, whoa, shit, something just flew around up here. I hope I don't get stung by some weird critter. Okay, well, guns at the ready. Yeah. But that's the thing. It's like so much money is spent, and I don't think it's a matter of money. It's a matter of like conveying information. And honestly, my personal philosophy about school is you don't have to teach anybody anything. You don't have to be an educator. Like all you have to do is inspire people to learn, and then hand them the information and let them learn for themselves. That's all you got to do. You don't have to put bullshit stuff into their heads. You don't have to do anything. Like all you have to do is inspire people to explore and learn things and dig deeper and be a critical thinker and stuff like that. And have the resources available. Like, it doesn't cost that much money. And that's what's so infuriating about this, is like, God damn it. You should have a college education by the time you come out of high school.
I mean, Running Start is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I did that. Like,
and the STEM stuff is a good thing. Like I'm a big fan of that. Like finally we're doing like proper, like teaching people proper information about
they
the
figured
world.
out the nerds are cool. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. Like I'm almost infuriated, like looking back on what I had to pay money for in order to get my degree that I just don't even remember anymore. I never used. Like, I mean, like I loved taking Swedish. It was really cool, but I mean, like I could not carry on a conversation. I mean, like, jag heter Casey, min mormor är gammal, är du gift?
Well, you know more Swedish than I know Russian right now, so
yeah. But I mean,
I took it for 3 years, so
that wasn't exactly like a conversation, you know.
No, it was kind of a monologue.
I think I said my grandmother is a fork or something.
Oh man. Well, and something that's like really kind of annoying about this whole like, oh, you got to go to college thing is how much we've been conditioned to look down on people that go to trade school and do stuff that people don't want to do, right? Like being a plumber, being an electrician, or something like that, digging ditches. Like, that stuff is actually really valuable. And an auto mechanic or something.
Yeah.
And it's all really valuable. Like, there are people who have gone to, they have a PhD and they can't fucking change an oil filter. Like, how is that possible?
So here's the thing. So long, long ago, before I had a college degree, probably the most skilled labor I had done was cooking, and I learned it all on the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that industry, generally, um, it is looked down upon if you've taken trade school cooking classes,
Huh.
because you come out of it thinking you know everything, and you don't.
That's kind of like the Dunning-Kruger effect, essentially.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because so it's like it's almost like trade school takes on certain things that might actually be better for like your traditional college, maybe. Like,
Yeah.
I
Or
mean, not
just like,
necessarily cooking, but I mean, like
well,
gastronomy, right? Like there is actually like a science to cooking. You know,
sure. But you
it's
can
it's it's
learn.
chemistry, really.
Oh yeah, but you can learn a lot of the ins and outs on the job, and maybe
Mhm.
treating it like a science kind of dissolves the magic, I guess,
But
in
like,
that regard.
if you knew a little bit of chemistry
Hmm.
while you were learning to cook, it would actually, one would help the other,
Oh,
really.
some physics and stuff like that for sure, definitely. Well, and those are things that could easily be taught. You should learn that stuff. You should know that stuff by the time you get out of middle school. Just saying, like, people should have that kind of fundamental understanding.
I mean,
Um,
there are developmental, I don't want to say limitations, but like, your general kind of aptitude for certain things, it has to develop along with the rest of your brain,
oh,
right?
sure.
I mean, like you can't expect most people to be able to quote Shakespeare out of the third grade, or
No,
or at least understand what the hell is being said, the
yeah,
context
well,
of it.
that's a kind of a lifetime thing. Like you
Yeah.
develop that over time. But planting the seeds of that is really important when you're young. Maybe not Shakespeare, but other things.
No, yeah, like, well, I mean, things like, like my parents would get me stuff like a chemistry set, a chessboard. Like I never really had anyone to play chess with outside of my family growing
Hmm.
up until, like maybe I was a teenager or something. And, like you and I have played chess, and
Hmm.
Joe and I, like there's a few people that I've been able to play it with. In fact, I was just thinking earlier, it's been a long time since I played chess, and I really need to do it again because
We
it helps you think ahead.
Oh, it totally, absolutely. Like, dude, we should do like a live stream chess game. Like, that would be kind of fun. Oh man. And I used to be competitive about chess. Like, you have to win. And it's like, no, no. Chess is not about winning. Like,
You could have a lot of different goals.
go,
Make
yeah.
it last as long as possible. Make it as short as
It's
possible.
to me, it's about honing your skills, about
Mhm.
challenging yourself. Caleb, by the way, was the oh God, he is so good. Um, but like, it's about honing your skills, going up against like something that's not easy. You don't have God mode in a video game or something. It's like all just logic and tactics and moving these pieces. You have very simple rules, but it's very complex.
Mhm.
Um, in fact, I think they should probably teach chess in school. That should be a thing. Everybody should play it. It's kind of a brilliant game, honestly, for learning. And it's like the art of war. People are like, well, the art of war, it applies to warfare. No, actually, it applies to everything,
Yeah.
from business to jobs to relationships and to war. Like,
Yeah.
it's all over the place. Like, those skills are applicable everywhere because it's human nature that you're dealing with. That's your opponent,
And
basically.
diversity.
Yeah.
It not only diversity, but how to like maximize diversity to your benefit. Like,
Hmm.
oh, okay, this piece moves only this way. Well, when I need to call on that, I have to remember that's the piece I want to do this job, and sometimes you have to think ahead 3, 4, 5 steps to put them in that position, and
Yeah.
anticipate what your opponent will do, and how the terrain will be changing. Like, all of that critical thought
Oh
is
yeah.
it's priceless, to have,
Totally.
yeah, to gain an understanding of that through a game. Like,
Yeah.
I almost don't even want to call chess a game.
Well,
It's
okay, game theory is very important and applies to real life as well. Um, all of those things, like, we would think like, oh, games is for kids. It's just something fun you do. No, it's actually an extension of our humanity. The conflicts that we have, those kinds of things. Like, how do we deal
Yeah.
with it?
Well, I mean, I want to be clear. I don't want to steer away from calling it a game because I think of games as childish or anything.
Mhm.
I more want to think of it as like a puzzle,
Simulations.
that
Yeah.
is always changing because there's another unpredictable human on the other side, changing the shape of the board you're playing on,
Well,
right?
and games are like tackling dangerous situations in a way that doesn't pose you personally any real world danger. So it's like a simulation. You can pretend that you're doing something without the risk of anybody getting hurt. The worst that's going
Mhm.
to happen is somebody's going to be like, "Hey, I won," or something like that, and they get some kind of award.
Would you like to
And
play a game?
that's you should have said it in a little bit more computer voice, like Whopper from yeah, War Games. Shall we play a game? Oh yeah, good movie, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, oh man. Oh, and of course, Whopper's conclusion, which is the only way to win the game is not to play at all. Um,
Huh.
good Cold War era strategy. Um,
The quickest way to end a war is to lose.
okay, Sun Tzu. Uh, so going back to college, like there was something that like I thought about trade schools and stuff. One of my favorite people, Mike Rowe, hosted a show called Dirty Jobs.
Micro
Uh,
what?
not micro, not like micro machines. No, Mike Rowe. He hosted a show called Dirty Jobs where it was like kind of showcasing all of the filthy, uncomfortable stuff that people do for their jobs, and kind of saying like, hey, this is good stuff. Like maybe you might want to do this, even though it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Um, and because people need that. The thing is
Yeah.
like you had talked about, like it's not always about money, although some of the dirtiest jobs pay really well. So
Yeah. That's
if you want
true.
money, maybe you want to go to a trade school and learn it, get yourself a dirty job. But it's also about like accomplishments, like making the world a better place and things like that. And I think that's something that a lot of people care about, but they're told that they shouldn't care about it. But you should. And that's a hard thing to get around, especially when your family's involved and your family's like, well, if you're not like a rocket scientist, you're nothing to me. You're dead to me. Well, you could be a garbage collector and be a hero, nevertheless.
Well, I mean, one thing that this pandemic has really opened people's eyes to is, well, some people's eyes, is that those jobs aren't really to be looked down upon. They are relied upon.
Oh, yeah.
They are
Delivery and stuff
totally
like that.
essential. Yeah, like the things you don't see, that you don't think of, like the people handling your wastewater.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's essential personnel. Like, in the line of work that I'm in now, like related to COVID, these are the things that I have to start thinking about and addressing. And You know, if you're like a practicing empath and always trying to like think of how things affect other people, it's like that really opens your eyes to how so many critical uh like pillars of our foundation of society, right, are just shit upon.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing. It's like
Why? Like,
that's a good point. Like some of the most important facets of society are looked down upon the most, and that's a problem. Like the thing is, if I respect anybody who's willing to do anything I wouldn't do. The guys and gals that get up on the helicopter and they stick the hot stick on the power lines and crawl along them to fix an insulator. Like nope, I'm not gonna, nope, I would never do that. So great respect. If you're gonna climb like a radio tower to change a fucking light bulb, you got balls of steel. Um, like that's respectable.
oh
Even
yeah.
if it's somebody who's like shoveling poo out of something or digging a hole or dealing with a sewer line or something like that, that's very respectable, because would you do that? That's the question you have to ask yourself. If you would not do that, well, then you should be a little more introspective, I guess.
Yeah.
And maybe care a little bit more about the people who are doing things you would never do. Yeah. And that's the whole thing about dirty jobs. Like that gave me a huge respect for people who do things that are kind of societally looked down upon,
Yeah.
as being like beneath us. Oh, those are just the peons. They're just a bunch of, well, it's like, okay, so here's the thing. Those people are actually happy. They're smiling and laughing, even as they're shoveling poo, like,
Well,
huh.
even the ones who quote unquote do nothing should not be looked down upon. You actually should feel bad that they may be in a situation where their immense potential is unable to be realized because of their monetary situation, their socioeconomic status, right? They could be the next Einstein, but they don't have the money to get the education, to have the piece of paper, to get the job, to be recognized for who they are.
Or they don't have the knowledge to realize that potential independent of
even
piece
that
of paper.
Like and I mean, again, that's kind of society telling them that they're a piece of shit and like beating them down, like,
well, and how many people here's a thought, like how many people died thinking they lived the dream when their idea of the dream was having more pickup trucks than their neighbor or something like that. Like, okay, so in the grand scheme of things, in a cosmic perspective, like that doesn't mean shit. You're basically a nothing. And like maybe there's a homeless person that did something great, like and maybe they are seen better. Like
early in season 1, we interviewed a homeless gentleman or a formerly homeless gentleman that has picked himself up and got himself a life and a job. And you know what? It's not like a college degree requiring job, but you know what? If he weren't there at that job, people might not live as long as they do. Like he's actually critical to the longevity of life of others. And I mean,
exactly. And think about,
if that's
like,
not important, then
if you make
what it is.
I mean, imagine the people who make like $200,000-$300,000 a year being coders or Boeing engineers or something, thinking they're
telling you what to invest when.
Buy. Oh yeah, not going to go down that rabbit hole. But like what's the value of a human life and their achievements? I would ask that, like, really think about that, ponder it. Um, and yeah, oh man, wow. Jesus,
I
this
mean,
is quite the
anytime
conversation.
anytime I talk about education, it always comes down to like the human condition. Because the way I revere education is it's like something that I never want to stop doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's prohibitively expensive. Like I've always said, even since I was a teenager, if I had endless amounts of money, I'd go to school all day. I would
Well,
put
okay,
myself
so
through school.
you okay, it does cost money if you want that piece of paper, but it doesn't cost anything to learn, especially in today's world. Like, you can spend days and days on YouTube, just YouTube alone, like learning all manner of things. Like, you don't have to prove anything to anybody that you know something if you want to learn something.
There's
If you want to
elements.
learn it for yourself, like knowing that you know how to do something or understand something, comprehending things like understanding mathematics or science or, I don't know, space or whatever, you name it, biology or something, like, it's all out there.
Yeah,
um
yeah, but it's missing an important element. And I bet you're thinking that I'm gonna say it's, like the assuredness that the information you're getting is correct. And I mean that is important, but
well,
the
yeah.
most important element I think that's missing from that is being amongst others who are also learning and hearing their perspectives and
Hmm.
considering those and bringing your perspectives to their consideration. Like that networking, that bouncing off of ideas is kind of the forgotten, like, shadows of education, right? Like we forget that learning is actually so much more than the master and the teacher, or the teacher and the grasshopper, or whatever. uh, Beer.
Take the pebble out of my hand, grasshopper.
But like some of the knowledge that I have retained the most, and I've lauded this class multiple times on the show, but my brain and behavior class at UW Bothell, where our former guest Doug Wacker taught
Yeah.
the class. That was so cool, the coolest class, because it was a science class that had no science prerequisites. So I sat next to a guy that was a business major, and there were people, just people that had no science background whatsoever. And we were here learning about the brain and how the brain and the connectome and all that stuff makes us who we are. And it was more philosophical than anything, but you're learning science at the same time.
Yeah.
And it was a collaborative effort. It wasn't just somebody up front telling us all these facts and we wrote the facts
Like
down.
a lecture, just
Yeah.
somebody just lecturing to you, telling you things.
No, he was really like kitchen sink microscopying the crap out of it. Like he was just creating
Well,
dialogue.
and
You know,
I mean, you had to pay for that, but my point is, the average person doesn't have to pay for knowledge, understanding. If you want some kind of legal document that says, yes, officially, you know these things, you got to pay for that because it's a legal document. Welcome to the modern world. Um, but if you just want to know for knowledge's sake, you don't have to pay anything. And the internet does provide that mechanism, that exchange of ideas, people conversing and trading thoughts and this back and forth kind of thing, which I think is really valuable.
yeah, I mean, considering we have a channel called Kitchen Sink University where we try to teach people what we know. I still feel a little weird about just like if you don't already have a foundation of critical thinking, the knowledge, I'm not going to even call it learning, the knowledge that you acquire from self-study isn't guaranteed to be in the correct direction. Like if you fall prey to the confirmation bias and things like that, you're going to be, well, like the anti-vaxxer, like he knew his stuff, but it was
Mhm.
all crap. Like
Well, yeah.
he knew how to learn. He's a more brilliant person than I am, but I have more like practical, provable information at my fingertips than he does, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
he
it does.
knows how to learn better than I do, but
Hmm.
he doesn't know how to discern what is plausible or
Well,
implausible,
and maybe that's a good point. Like, uh, how do you differentiate between how do you separate fact from fiction? Um, like,
It's a skill, really. I
well, it
mean,
is, but maybe that's a skill you should
that's why
know.
you take English classes, kids.
Well, yeah, but maybe that's a skill everybody should know long before they go to college. Like, why would that be a skill you have to learn in college? Why don't you know that in elementary school? You should, you could.
But yeah, you should.
I mean, it's actually
Even as things
very,
are, you probably should
yeah,
actually.
it's very simple.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the whole point is like, people just say education. Oh, people have to learn things and they need to know things and that kind of stuff. It's like, well, yeah, I mean that's a good point, but what things are they learning? Who's teaching? What are they teaching?
I
I don't know.
wonder. We spoke a little bit about aptitude along with natural development, right?
Yeah.
I wonder, and I mean, this wouldn't necessarily be an ethical experiment, but I wonder if it's not that bad.
That's how you
If
get Nazis, just saying. Well, this
if
wouldn't be an ethical experiment, but okay, go ahead. Sorry.
if what if you taught toddlers nothing else but logic and critical thinking?
Mm. Ooh, I'm totally on board with that. That's a
Like
good idea.
like I I know the assumption is that they just wouldn't be able to grasp it, but
No, it's very simple.
yeah.
Logic is a very simple thing.
So if you started that early,
Huh.
like I am not, the way our society is built now, I am actually not a big fan of homeschooling, at
Mm-hmm.
least not for any extended period of time. But if you were to do, if you were to lay a great foundation like that
Yeah.
of critical thinking and logic, you could almost let the child decide their own educational path from a very early age,
Ooh, man. Oh,
because they
that's
would
good.
they would have the ability to structure their thinking in that manner
Oh,
in a
man.
meaningful way,
Oh, that's a great idea. Oh,
theoretically. uh,
theoretically. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's kind of funny that the logic and reason education I got from a Christian private school is what led me to be an atheist. So, I mean, it doesn't matter the source, it matters what you're teaching. Um,
well,
that's a good point.
that's funny. You saying that just kind of made me think real quick about my upbringing and the kinds of thinking that I was exposed to that probably shaped a lot of how I think, right?
Mhm.
So my parents, my mom was very faith heavy, and my dad was skeptical to the point of, like, like Art Bell and stuff like that. Like he was into conspiracy theories and stuff. Not like super seriously necessarily, but
that's a good combination. Yeah.
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 So I have that combination, right? Like where I was able to apply critical thinking to stuff, but I was also able to determine what I could just put faith in experts on and take them at their word, and it kind of developed into who I am.
Well, and you say that there's a problem with homeschooling.
That's not schooling, that's raising. That's a
Well,
completely different thing.
I don't see a differentiation between those, but that's my own personal view.
I mean, I just see it as like focus. Like raising isn't necessarily a focus, but
Well,
schooling is.
the thing is, like, as a child, you look up to your parents and you think they know everything. And, in school, you're taught like your teachers know everything and they're the gods here. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
and so, really, I, I, I mean, it depends on the people. Um,
education, teaching, whatever you want to call it, is a form of conditioning, right? And
yeah.
that has an intent and a purpose and a goal. Whereas like raising, I think is just a far broader thing than that. Like you're not conditioning a child, hopefully, right? Like
Well, you would hope,
you're
yeah.
not raising them to like respond a certain way to the sound of a ringing bell, you know?
No, and I would hope that if you had a child, that you'd be raising them to be an independent thinker, like to be a critical thinker, to be skeptical and always
Yeah.
questioning things and stuff like that. But that's probably not something that's a common nowadays thing.
It's interesting though. Joe, our mutual friend Joe, his
Mm-hmm.
parents very much raised him that way. And
Mm-hmm.
now Joe and I both went to a Catholic school. That's where we met. But his parents raised him with this laissez-faire, you choose what religion you want. And Joe decided to study all religions and
Hmm.
decide from there. And he's, you know, spiritual, agnostic, like way more to the faith end of things. Whereas I was raised in this rigid, structured Catholic environment. And I went the complete opposite way.
Yeah.
Stark atheist. I mean, like I have spiritual tendencies and stuff like that, but
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
it's very much interesting how like the more open and liberal you are to let a person develop by themselves, the more they actually might end up like you than you would think, right?
Yeah. Well, and that oh man, wow, that
I'm just full of mind benders
yeah.
tonight.
Oh man, wow, that I think that we're like over an hour into this conversation. I think that
Oh wow.
might be enough for now.
Yes, we kind of stayed on topic of
Yeah,
college a little bit for the
pretty
most part.
much. I think it's all related.
Yeah, just education in general is
Yeah,
there's always
like
plenty to talk.
learning and all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh man. Wow. That.
I could keep going.
Oh man.
That was a
Yeah.
good one.
If anybody in the comment section wants us to expound on the diverging topics, feel free to leave a
A
comment
lot
down.
of our education related episodes generate the most comments, I think.
Huh.
It's something a lot of people are passionate about. It's
Oh,
something
I
that
am
teaches
too.
something to
Yeah.
everybody, like
Yeah.
because we all have to go through it. It's you don't really survive unless you learn things.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
everyone's got their own idea of how
Yeah.
it works best.
And being like a survivalist and independent, like kind of person, a voluntarist. Like that's very important to me. Like knowing things, maybe not so much to others, but yeah.
I drink and I know things.
Mm. Man, that's a, I don't even know. I feel like we kind of scratched the surface on that one. Like I don't know that we went as deep as we could have.
This show is just like throwing a dart at a board, you know, like not in the sense that like, well, I mean, like basically every time you throw it, it's going to be a little different outcome. So I mean, we could take this topic tomorrow and go in a completely different direction.
Oh yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah.
That
if any of you have comments, please throw them in the comment section, like a logical person would do. And you know,
yeah, and keep it civil, for God's sake. Like keep it civil. Like, God, we're fucking talking about education, so you know.
Yeah. And thanks for deep sea diving with us into college and what is it good for? Absolutely nothing.
Oh man, grow. Dirty jobs. All right. Have a good night, everybody.